Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I begin, I do want to make it crystal clear there are links up above to support me as well as my guest, CB Zane. So please click those links, support those links. They're super important. There's a Kickstarter that's going on, as well as you go buy me a coffee. And I do like my coffees, both digitally and caffeinated. And so without further ado, and I sort of tip my hat, CB Zane is here. And obviously, you've done pretty much everything from comic creating, comic writing. You're the co-owner of Outpost 46 Studios.
Yeah.
And you currently have a Kickstarter going on with Mighty Mite, which is funding on Kickstarter. You're funded, so that's out of the way right off the bat. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's new. It'll be fun, and I'm looking forward to just shooting the breeze, man.
Yeah, no, I am very excited because obviously your Kickstarter is fully funded. Mite is obviously, we're going to talk about that. But I do think the best place to start is that this is an Outpost 46 Studios comic. And what is Outpost 46 Studios? And I know you've done everything in comics.
Well, okay, so first I'm going to say it's actually Outpost 426. Studios, and there's a reason for it. The name comes from guy that I created it with is Mike Shoemaker, who he has actually written some Mite, and he's written Scorpiana for us, I should say. And Outpost 426 is a mashup of two of our favorite movies, which is The Thing, which was situated in Outpost 31, and then Alien or Aliens, which was LV 426. And so that's where the name comes from. So it's Outpost 426, that's our studio, and that's kind of become our moniker for our titles, like Into the Suck, which is, you can kind of see behind me, is my sci-fi adventure, and that is part of Outpost 426. And Scorpiana is another one that we've done, and I'm currently working on issue 3 for that. And the Mighty Mite, who, I mean, actually made her first appearance in Scorpiana #1. It continued with more of a more visceral, active role in part 2, in issue 2, and now she has her own book. And then
so
later on,
let's talk a little bit about that, because obviously Scorpiana is a different book. It completely, obviously, basically, two sisters get kidnapped. One of them is experimented by these kidnappers. They sort of expect her to be dead, and well, she's out for revenge, finding her sister and to fuck up some shit.
Yep.
And all in the process. And obviously, Mite was introduced in that run. Mite was also introduced in Comics Unity to some degree. I'm not too sure the complete order in which that Mite was introduced, but let's start with Scorpiana. And so what was that like? Because you first created this book, and it's separate from Mite, but it's also kind of nice when you have an entire company and your characters cross over, and obviously sort of teasing, and even just to test the market in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has lots of different levels that it works on. But Scorpiana ended up becoming a sort of the launch book for Mike Shoemaker and myself. And we hemmed and hawed forever about what character we wanted to go with. And actually, he's going to be releasing a character called Scarlet Steel, I think later this year. And that was the one, that we talked about for a long, long time. And she's evolved really over the course of about 20 years. And we just, nothing ever really clicked. And so we ended up, we were going to do this story, this team up book of these like daughters of gods. And I was doing character designs for that. And Scorpiana ended up becoming one of those characters. And somehow we evolved, and her story came, and I was like, you know what? We need to do this one. And so that's what we ended up doing. We went with Scorpiana, and her story, which, you encapsulated very well, gave birth to what is our Outpost 426 superhero universe, which is in part formed by, this event that takes place that creates this substance called quantium, which gives some people powers and other people it kills. And that's sort of part of the basis of our superverse, if you will.
And then even to further dive into this, because obviously Mite is the character that was introduced.
Mhm.
And what was that like even developing Mite? Because Mite is fascinating because she is 18 years old. She's got, the pink hair buns, very
Yeah.
anime-like. I love the way Mite looks.
Oh,
And
thanks.
well, she's still, somewhat of in between an adult and a kid in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, and figuring out where she wants to go. And she's like 5 feet. And if she was a wrestler, she'd be Alexa Bliss. I don't know if you know who Alexa Bliss is.
Right. Oh, yeah.
This is like right out of Mite. This is
Yeah.
exactly who she is.
And if I had to cast a movie, Alexa Bliss would definitely be one to consider. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, it's funny. Mite is a character that is sort of like, I guess, my baby of sorts. I drew her forever. I sketched her in my sketchbooks for, I don't know, the longest time. And her first look was actually more, I guess I would say, almost like Alexa Bliss before Alexa Bliss was Alexa Bliss. She had these pigtails that hung down, and the ends of them were pink, and she was blonde haired. And that was how I sketched her forever. And then you can even see that look in the first Scorpiana. She's in the background when they're talking about the burst, which is that event that takes place and how certain people were given powers. And you can see like her first look, her first costume, the one I drew all the time. But when it came time to really like fleshing her out, I felt like that look it was kind of being overdone. You started to see it with Harley Quinn, and that bled into some of the wrestlers. And so I wanted to get away from that, but I liked the pink idea. And so I did a couple of different versions of her hair. I even had her with a backwards baseball cap on. But the space buns kind of work, and it spoke to people. And so now she's, hashtag, it's pink space buns. And I redesigned her costume to fit. And yeah, and that's where it kind of came in and where it continues to go.
And then obviously one of the things that I like about Mite is that Mite is more anime-ish, if that makes sense. And I come out of the anime world. I'm obviously a big anime fan. I'm right now watching a lot of fantasy, a lot of, MMORPG type shows.
Yeah.
People getting trapped in video games, and this is like, I could imagine Mite being a character in that regard. And I like the fact that it does have that more anime, but it still is American, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because it's different in style, and I think it's very important to have different styles and also have something that's fresher.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because actually, like I've already drawn and written the second issue. It just needs to be colored at this point, and I switched up my style and went with what I call my zany style. And so going forward, that's what's going to happen. And that is more of a cartoony look. And so that kind of plays into that a little bit more. And I thought it fit Mite very, very well going forward. So that's the plan. Same stories, to be told, but just a little different art style that I thought, gave me a chance to have an outlet that way. And, continue to tell her story the way I keep envisioning it.
And then obviously I also do want to, because we're going to talk about the Kickstarter in a second, I promise. But I do also want to talk about Comics Unity 2020. Obviously that was spin-off comics that had Catnip and Sirenus, I want to say.
Correct.
I think I got the name right. I'm always concerned about names. Names are not my thing. And there's a bunch of cover art, and that was sort of also one of the first introductions of Mite. I'm not too sure, as I stated, the order, but how did that idea come about? Because I think it was you, Wendy, and Tom Hutchinson.
Correct.
That was your idea. I'm not too sure how that all came about, and it's super interesting.
So Wendy had already done like an online Comic-Con herself with her Naughty Fairies line, and she just killed it. I mean, there was nothing that existed like that. And she brought this idea of Artist Alley, and she had maps of the convention floor. And Wendy, if you know anything about Wendy Steen Shainer's her campaigns, she like has everything under the sun that you can possibly want or get for stretch goals. And so she had, your swag bag that you would get going to a con, and she made it a true online experience. And she got to talk with Tom Hutchison. They sat down at a Red Lobster and said, let's do this, but let's make it bigger. And so they wanted to bring in a third party for it. And I was lucky enough to be the one that asked. And then 3 of us collaborated on it and wanted to give that true con experience. offering our $25 beers that you can get at the concession stand, the swags that you can get, the passes, the lanyards, photo ops, even with the characters. So, you know, you could have your picture taken and with Mite or with Sirenus or with Catnip. So we tried to give as much of a con experience as we could. And, you know, that was my opportunity to introduce Mite, because when we first started talking about this, we weren't sure what characters we were going to go with. I think actually all three of us at one point were going to go completely different directions. And then for whatever odd reason, we all at the same time decided, you know what, let's do like a character. And I was thinking, well, I can do this spin-off of Mite. And Tom already had established, yeah, why am I blanking? Catnip, but through the Critter universe. And Wendy had this villain, Sirenus, as part of her Naughty Fairies. And so it all became a spin-off. And it was because of this idea where the name for the comic came, Spin-Off Comics. It wasn't something we consciously said, let's do spin-off comics. It just all, you know, happened organically. So if you're going the proper order of like Mite's appearance, it would have been Scorpiana 1, Scorpiana 2, and then her origin story in the comic Unity.
And then there's a bunch of stuff to talk about with this. So obviously, Spin-Off Comics comes out, and then that sort of happens. And then also there's a bunch of variants. I'm not too sure, because I know it was one or two people. It was either Keith Garv, who did a bunch of covers. And then I think also Chazus was involved somewhere in this entire thing. Either he was in Artist Alley or he did some exclusive covers. Because there was a bunch
of you're talking? Yeah. Yeah, Elias did one of the Mite exclusive covers. So he was involved as far as that. Keith did, these are the characters here, you can kind of see. He did 3 comic covers that actually connected. So that was a huge thing. And then I'm trying to think, I did the main cover for the spin-off book, and we each had our own, I think we had 3 variants each, if I remember correctly. So I had Pedro Perez as one of mine. Elias was another one. We all had the Garvey individuals, or you could buy all 3 and have them connect. So, and we all had a Steph Wilson as well.
And obviously, I don't know how well you know Wendy, and I'm not as familiar with Wendy as I am with Tom. And I know that you've been working with Tom since 2012, 2013. And so obviously, you know, and I'm sure you've been working with Wendy for a while too. I just don't know that history. I'm the first person to admit when I don't know something. But what was that like, all 3 of you working together? Because obviously you've all crossed paths, you've all worked with each other. And even
I had done a cover for Wendy prior to this, but I didn't really know her until we got to collaborating. And now Wendy is someone like I talk to weekly. I probably even talk with her more than I talk with Tom at this point. So she's an awesome, awesome person. She works hard at her craft. She has fun doing it. She just loves to create, and I think even more so, she loves pleasing the fans. And anyone who's dealt with Wendy and her Kickstarters, and she just goes over and above to get them things that, you know, she thinks they'll like. So, but the process itself of putting things together kind of, like I said before, happened organically. It was just like, hey, what about this? What about that? And it wasn't even like we said, okay, let's put a vote to it. It was like, oh yeah, good idea, let's do that. Or hey, and it very, you know, very easy going for the most part.
And then obviously it was very cool, and I only saw part of it, you know, and I was somewhat, you know, looking at it. I just was taking a long break from comics.
Yeah.
Of 2020, and my bank account needed it too. I'm the first person to admit it. Where I also needed a break from cons. I don't know how many people needed a break, but I needed this 15-month break. But that's a different discussion for a different day. But even talking more a little bit about Tom, because obviously you have a book that's sort of out, that's sort of not out with Tom, and that's Kaiju Epic.
Oh, right.
Obviously, that's very cool, and I know you've done some of the interior work, but you've also done, you know, some other stuff. And this is from Oz, and I just picked this up as an add-on because I don't think you could back it individually. I think it was an add-on,
Yeah.
And obviously, it's cool. I don't know if it was an add-on first and then put up later on. And I think the Kickstarter is going to be fulfilled in July.
Yeah. Yeah, Kaiju was something that Tom had released. It was probably a good year or two ago, I think. It had 3 stories in it, kind of like what Comic Unity ended up being, but each focused on a different kaiju. And I got the one that you saw there on the cover that I got to do, which took place, as you can see, carving into Big Ben there. It takes place in London, and it was written by Carrie Castor, and it was a lot of fun to work on a giant monster book.
Yeah, and one of the things that I kind of like about this is that I think it was released first on the Kickstarter, and then it's now on the web store to be ordered. And it's the same price on the Kickstarter and on the web store. Obviously, if you picked it up on the Kickstarter and you're already backing the Oz stuff, you're saving money shipping-wise, which is always helpful in that regard. And I also picked up some other stuff as well on that Oz thing. But even to be part of the Oz thing, because it's sort of cool, because it's a nice funnel into it. It's nice to be part of a Kickstarter. Also, I think BackerKit helps to achieve the goal, which is another thing which helps to achieve and assure stretch goals. And so there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on with it. And so what is that like for you, knowing that your cover is a part of it and that it's another thing that's offered as an exclusive? Because people who back Kickstarters, like, I want exclusive covers, and I'm willing to pay for exclusive covers.
Yeah, I love being part of like as many Kickstarters as I can. I mean, for one, I just love doing the art itself, and to be able to kind of go with this whole Comic Unity idea here, being able to promote other people's work that I believe in, that I think is very good, that's very strong, with my art involved, I'm more than happy to do that. So it's cool to be part of. Whether it's Tom's or Wendy's or Luis Torres, who has the Lily the Demoness going on right now. I think I have 4 covers for that campaign. And I think Flesh Eating Cheerleaders from Outer Space just ended, and I had a wraparound cover for that one. So it's just, I love being part of it, and we really are this indie comic community. We kind of promote each other. So, as much as I'm part of theirs, they'll do their best to try to promote my stuff, and it's awesome. It's a great community to be part of.
Yeah, and since we're on Kickstarters, let's dive into the Mite Kickstarter. So I know that you're fully funded, and obviously a lot's going on, and you introduced Mite with 2 books, and we just sort of spoke about that. But what prompted you to want to launch the Kickstarter now? Because obviously, you had this character, you sort of had teasers with her, you had an origin story, and now she's having her single book come out. And so what's the story on why now? Why is it going on? What prompted you?
You know what? I believe in the character. She's near and dear to me, and I wanted to get it out to as many people as possible. And I knew, we had a certain number that backed our Comic Unity, and I thought I really tossed and turned about whether I wanted to take that story and release it completely on its own, or whether I wanted to start fresh. But because it was really her origin story, if I was trying to tap into more people to be her audience, I felt like that was the best way to do it. And in doing that, I thought, well, I still have to do more. So I added additional pages to the story that's in Comic Unity. I added a couple of additional backup stories that still flow into, what takes place in the story as well. And I was lucky enough, Wendy Shaner wrote one of the backup stories, which I drew in my zany style, which I was talking about before. And then the other one I wrote, and I got Joel Souza to do it, who has a very Bruce Timm type style. And kind of going back to what you were saying about Mite feeling very anime look, I thought Joel's style fit very well, because it just reminded me so much of the Bruce Timm animation. And again, if I could create an animated series about Mite, it might look just like what he put together. So now this story, which was originally 20 pages in Comic Unity, is now a 36-page book. and it's issue 1 all on her own, and then issue 2 will pick up from there, and you know, we'll see how far it goes from there.
And then obviously, as I stated, Mite is a very interesting character because she's 18.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking a leap of faith here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but she is in college or going off to college. You know, she's in more of an adult setting,
Mm-hmm.
and she's sort of in this weird thing where she is a superhero, but she's not a superhero, and she's kind of walking that line. And I don't know if there are superheroes in this world, but she has superpowers, and she obviously is on more of the side of good than evil. And obviously she has to deal with her powers, dealing with, you know, choices, dealing with becoming an adult, dealing with people maybe finding out who should know, who doesn't know. And what is that all like? Because it's kind of fun to have this type of story. And then you also have her being somewhat very relaxed, kind of fun to hang out with. And now she's also dealing with some serious threats, and well, there's some shit going on, for lack of a better word. So
right,
a lot of interesting things going on but it's also, this book doesn't take itself too seriously.
Right. Yeah. Mite, you hit on a couple of really key things with her. I wanted to keep the book fun. You know, where Scorpiana is kind of an R-rated title, I didn't want Mite to be R-rated. I wanted it to be something that anyone could pick up and enjoy. I want her personality to be very bubbly. She's a very upbeat person. And I wanted her origin to be a little different than your normal origin, where like you have the nerdy, you know, Peter Parker who gets bit and doesn't know what to do with his newfound glory. Whereas Mite, you know, in her origin story, it's her senior year of high school that she's just completing. And she's an athlete. She's a 3-sport athlete, even though she's, you know, and this is before, you know, you find out where the pink hair comes from and everything, but she's a 3-sport athlete. So when she gets these new abilities and this new strength, she kind of knows what to do because she's got an athletic base to begin with. And rather than being like, oh no, what happened to me? Like, what am I going to do? She's kind of like, this is really awesome. I can do cool stuff. And she just embraces it. And I wanted it to feel fresh and new. And it's not to say that it won't deal with some issues. The origin story has this like secondary story going along with it that's it's personal to me, and it deals with a very serious condition. You know, one of the characters has cancer, and it all plays together that way. So in writing my influence, my biggest influence was probably the TV show Scrubs, more so than even superhero books, because Scrubs was one of those shows that I loved because you could laugh and have fun, but then the episode might make you cry at the end, and it would deal with very serious issues at times, but do it in a very heartfelt way that you could laugh and cry at the same time. And I wanted to be able to try to pull that into Mite a little bit. So yes, it is a little bit more lighthearted. Sometimes it will deal with darker issues. But ultimately I want it to be fun and fit her personality and let that drive, you know, her in the story. And, you know, that's my hope, is that people just kind of fall in love with Mite and just want more of her, you know, positivity. Not that everything's going to be easy for her.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff, and obviously I don't want to push too hard because I want people to obviously back it, and so I'm not going to push too much harder into what's going on with it. Obviously, we're sort of dealing with her coming into these powers, and then you know, we're going to deal with the threats she deals with and everything that's sort of going on. But it is going to be that fun type of story.
Yeah,
it's kind of nice to have a superhero / superpowered book that doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah,
because I read a bunch of dark books.
Yeah,
and I enjoy that stuff. And don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. But at the same time, I also like to read things that are fun. You know, I'm in the middle of reading Robotech right now, like the Centennials. So I'm going old school right now.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, because like, and that's part of the reason with Outpost, like, I have Into the Suck, which can be edgy and it's sci-fi, and I love that component. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, but I also love superheroes. So Mite lets me delve into the world of superheroes, and Scorpiano lets me dive into something, the edgy superhero verse, you know? And then, you know, there's so many other things I want to be part of. Like other things, like I do want to do a darker story. At some point I would love to do a grindhouse comic type thing, which is just like a blood fest, where anything goes. And someday I will do that. And then I have a very mature title coming out later this year called Black Rabbit, which allows me to explore that realm of things. So it's nice because it gives me creative outlets like all over the place. And that's something I'm really, really like happy about and glad that I have the opportunity to do.
So obviously, we're going to talk about some of this stuff if we have time. If we have time. So I don't want to make any promises, to anybody, but I do want to talk about the rewards because I know we have plenty of time for that. So obviously, Kickstarters, one of the draws for me with a Kickstarter is cover work. It's a variety of other stretch goals, and it's also the fact that, you know, I'm assuming when people run Kickstarters that I'm getting the best deal possible on a Kickstarter, and that's what I expect. And you offer a variety of things. So I like, one of the things that I like is that you offer a digital copy. And so I think digital is massively important because usually digital is cheaper, and sometimes I can't afford to back a physical book.
Right.
But I can afford to back a $5 or $6 digital book, or even a $4 digital book, or sometimes people throw a $2 digital book.
Right.
And I don't know if I'm ready to, you know, back a physical book at 20 bucks or 30 bucks because it's a commitment. So I like that, but I also like the fact that you have all these covers, and we have the ability to do pictures, which is awesome. And hopefully my pictures are correct. And if they're not, well, let's pray that I can do something right here. So I believe this is cover A.
It is. Yep. And this is my cover for it, colored by Elenia DiNapoli, who is one of my favorite colorists to work with. And I know you've interviewed Sanju, and Sanju is another colorist I love to work with. But Elenia just seems to work well with my line work. So this is the main cover. And it kind of captures everything I wanted it to about Mite. So
so obviously this is the main cover. I like this cover where she's like holding up the hand, and the hand is like plant-like in a lot of ways. And so it's kind of a crazy cover. It also sort of says, I think, what Mite is about. You know, I think this is one of those things, and you have, I think, 9 or 10 covers. So obviously, as we're about to go down the route here, we're about to see that some of these covers sort of go a little bit away from what Mite is and just show off some awesome art. And so I think this is cover B.
Yep. And this was mine that I actually colored. And this is one I just, you know, talk about Mite being positive. Like I always think of her as the ray of sunshine if she's around people. And so I played off of that idea and just did the sunshine cover. You know, so I tried to make her skin a little bit more tan, but still show that she's powerful and she's cute and she's sexy. And, you know, I don't want her to be like exploitative per se. This would be about as risque as I would want to get, kind of. But that's just her too. She wouldn't be the girl who goes to like a pool party and just sits in the corner wrapped up in a towel. She'd be the first one to jump in and say, "Hey, there's a pool. This is fun. Let's do this." So,
and so this is there's 2 things I like and 2 things I want to talk about. So I like the fact that she's holding up the Mite thing. I love that. I just think that's extremely playful, and I think it's also the idea that, but it doesn't detract from her, because what my eye goes to, and this could be because, hey, I like pretty girls, I like girls in bikinis, or it could just be that I appreciate women's beauty in a lot of ways, and I come from the world of Zenescope, so obviously you all know where I'm at in my head. But I like the fact that she's holding it up because it is playful, because it doesn't take away from her, which is what the cover draws to. Obviously, the light and the sun is behind her, which helps to center the eye. But it's a very playful thing, the way the title's in it. And I think it's a really nice touch. And so I like this cover a lot because it does do that. And it's kind of, you know, nice. And also the color palette is cool too, where her hair's a little bit more purple off of the yellow, which makes it pop.
Yeah, and I really try to be conscientious of color theory when I'm doing coloring. So purple and orange is a nice complementary color scheme. And then you take in like the oranges and browns of her skin, and it does tend to play nicely. And this was actually not that this was the original idea I had, but I knew I wanted to do a cover with her holding up the logo in some way. And I probably have 5 or 6 different, sketched covers, and ultimately it ended up being this one. So.
And I like this cover a lot because I think it's very playful, and I think it's super, super smart to do a cover like this. And then talking about risque covers, and we might get a bit controversial, but I don't have a problem with nude covers. I know some people do have issues. Obviously, I was speaking with somebody last night about this, and we were having a very interesting discussion about it. And the way I view it is that I know Tom doesn't want to do Dorothy nude.
Right.
He doesn't have a problem with other characters doing nude, and I don't think Tom's going to mind me saying it because he made this very public on my show. And if he does, I'll take the L on that one. But the idea of it is that what is that like to say? Hey, I'm not really interested in doing a nude cover because it doesn't really fit per se with the character, and also it's the idea that people do nude covers on Kickstarter, and it's getting overused, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get funded. And I respect the hustle.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, the integrity of the art. Because I feel like if you did a new cover of Mite, a bunch of people would probably appreciate it, but it definitely is not to her character in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I've said I really don't think I'll ever do a nude version of Mite cover. It doesn't fit what I want the book to be, and you can still be sexy and playful without doing that. I'm not adverse to doing nude covers. I have
you've done it into the stock, you've done it for other things. It's not an issue where the way I view it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just think it doesn't fit with this character, and you need to know what certain characters do. I don't know if you know Mike Teener, but he has a book called Black Jackets. A nude cover in Black Jackets makes no sense, but a nude cover in Midnight Moon makes 100% sense. Yeah. And I feel like with Mite, that's where this stands. And correct me if I'm wrong, Into the Suck is a perfect example of a book that makes sense because, Ursula is a character who would pretty much go naked into combat if she wanted to.
Yeah. And you know what? I agree with you. It fits. Like Ursula, again, she isn't someone who thinks of herself as sexy at all. She could walk around in her underwear, and she would only do it because it was convenient or because she didn't have clean clothes to wear. She wouldn't do it to flaunt herself. She's just kind of like, whatever. Like, Mite would be very conscientious, and so I wouldn't do that to her. But then, like Scorpiana, like it fits the demeanor of that book. It's got edgy scenes to it and risque scenes in it, so it does make sense. So I agree with you. If it makes sense with the comic, I think I'm all for it. I'm usually not someone who wants to do a cover, like a nude cover, or have one for one of my books that's done distastefully, though. Like I try to be very, very careful walking that line, what I show, how I show it. And I don't want anything pornographic by any means, ever.
You're not Boundless Comics.
Right.
It is a good way to put it. I'm throwing out something that people who know comics are going to get exactly what we're talking about, and people who don't are going to go look it up, and hopefully somebody who gets offended is not going to be in the room. Right. So and then another cover, and this is definitely my style, is this, and it's the Manga Style, and obviously this is sort of right up my alley of what I do. It's got very much a Japanese animation feel to it. It's got a bit more of an old school Japanese animation, somewhat 80s, maybe early 90s. We're not going Golden Age Tezuka. We're not going Golden Age Tezuka on this. If you went Tezuka on this, I happen to know a lot about the guy. I'd be very impressed. But it's definitely like late 70s, 80s, early 90s style. Yeah.
Luis Torres, who I mentioned before, had asked me to. He's coming out with a Manga Style book, and he had asked if I'd be willing to try the style, and I was like, not really something I do, but what the heck? I'm a fan of it. I like well done manga. I'm very picky about my manga or anime for that matter. So I did something for him, and I really liked the way it turned out, and I had a blast coloring it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this with Mite and see what happens. So this is actually my cover, my version for Mite in my Manga Style, and it's something with the proper references around me I can pull off, I think. But I thought, again, the playfulness of what manga is fit very well with Mite.
It's also a very, very cool cover in a lot of ways, and manga style can be very, very good. It can be very, very bad depending on how it's done. And obviously, I read a lot of manga, and I'm a big anime junkie. And this is definitely in that style, and it is a risk because not everybody's gonna like it, but it is very cool in that regard. And so I like it. It's also very Speed Racer-esque. Is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things about manga or anime is just the action that it brings to it. And I tried to capture that with the speed lines and stuff, and just.
And then obviously this one too. And so now we're getting into sort of a little bit away from what the comic represents, like the cover A and even the cover B. Yeah. But now we're getting into some really interesting art. And this is Ivan, and I'm not going to attempt to say his last name.
Yeah,
Cupid Tough.
And I saw Ivan's work. I came across it, I want to say, on ArtStation, and his faces were amazing. The eyes, and there was such innocence in the eyes and the face. And I knew immediately if I could get him to do a Mite cover, I wanted him to, because I just knew he could capture, just like I said, really the title, cute but tough. I think he nailed it. And I'm so happy to have him as part of this, because I just get lost in the eyes that he draws.
And then another one that you're probably lucky to have is also this one, which is John Royal. And I don't know if you've seen John Royal's latest work, but the guy's killing it in Zenescope. And that's a big deal. Whether John will admit it or not, whether he knows it or not, obviously, and I would love to interview John Royal at some point. I think it'd be such an interesting discussion and everything that's going on. But obviously, this is cool in a lot of ways also, where we get that almost breaking of the cover apart and her coming at us. And it's a very cool cover because it's action-packed. I'm actually torn between this cover and the manga cover.
Yeah.
And it's a tough position. I got $20. Everybody.
Right.
I got to make a choice here. So maybe you'll make the choice for me.
John is super cool to deal with. He showed me this version, and it was modified slightly from the original. Very, very slightly. Just like bringing it a little bit closer. And one of the things I want Mite to have is action. I want her to feel like she's got action, and he crushed it with this. I love his style. It reminds me a lot of J. Scott Campbell. And again, Mite being the playful character that she is, there's so many different versions I could see of people drawing her. And so when I was able to put together this stable of artists, and I could get John, I was like, oh, this is so cool.
It even goes further, because I think Sebastian Chang is from the Philippines, and Sebastian Chang works a lot with John. Yes. And that's the other thing too. I think I could be mistaken, but I know they've worked on a bunch of Zenescope books together.
Correct.
And it's this idea that when it's kind of like, when Mike Crome and Sandru work together, or Mike Crome and Michael D. Pascal work together, almost exclusively, that a colorist knows the artist. Yeah. And that helps tremendously as well. Because if you look at it, it's the fact that that blue popping off, and we're breaking through, and it's almost like we're breaking through a wall scene, might punch through it. So obviously, very, very cool cover in that regard as well. Yeah. That helps. Bring it out.
And John kind of has his own team. Jagdish is his inker. Sebastian is one of 3, maybe 4 colorists that he works with. And I had no problem with that. Sebastian, I believe, has worked with Marvel, so
I think Sebastian has worked on some Overwatch stuff also.
Right. So
it's crazy. So this is a cool cover, and then this cover scares me.
This is Wendy's work.
So real. And
I
it's like
know.
the only reason, and if Wendy wants to attack me, that I wouldn't get this cover. The only reason why is that it doesn't look like a comic cover,
Yeah.
and it looks real. And I'm just like, it would like I would wake up in the middle of the night and it would be staring at me, and I would like legitimately jump 10 feet out of my bed, like, and it's like Alexa Bliss with pink hair in space buns.
Yeah.
Is this cover?
Yeah,
Gone,
Wendy's
gone,
style.
gone.
She does that 3D, like, you know, with the Photoshop, and it's amazing. This is one I've talked about it before. If you can ever zoom in, like the skin has texture to it. It's just incredible.
It almost looks like action figures.
Yes. In the depth that's with it. And one of my favorite things I talked about too with this is that the background, this is Mite's prom, and it takes place at an aquarium, and you can see the huge tank behind them.
It looks like sharks.
Yeah.
Behind them.
Yeah, it's like whale sharks swimming, and I love this style. And it's another thing, like when I offer covers, I want to be able to offer a variety, because kind of getting back to one of the things you're saying, like, you know, do you go with the John Royal, you know, drawing, or do you go toward the anime style? And everybody has their little niche, you know, that they like. I'm just a fan of all different types of artwork, so I try to offer that to everyone too.
And I mean, I don't know how far you got in the interviews, because you said that you were listening to some of my stuff, but yeah. I've said this before, I've been saying it a lot more, and obviously I'm not just saying it for comics, but I'm saying it as a collective, as where we're going in society. There's three things that are determining the future of society. It's on demand. It's the idea of big libraries, which is what I'm doing with a lot of interviews right now. And my library is huge from last year and this year.
Right.
And then it's also complete customization and choice.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find with Kickstarter is a little bit of on demand, where it's a little bit of a hybrid, because it does take some time to produce it, and you can't just like roll out a print of a book. But it's more of that customization a lot with a lot of these covers, especially when you get 4, 5, 6 covers.
Correct.
And that is a big thing that's determining where I think we're going as a society. And I think it's super important. And obviously, I think there's 3 or 4 more covers we got to get to.
Yeah.
And this idea that, you know, that makes a big difference. And that's why I back Kickstarters. I am a cover hoarder, where I back Kickstarters almost exclusively for the cover primary. And no offense, and then please don't, I'm more interested in the cover art than the actual story of Mite.
No,
because I'm like, this cover art is phenomenal. And so that's where I'm at.
Thanks. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that cover art it's become its own thing. You know, I know when I first started collecting, and I shouldn't say when I first started collecting, when variant covers became a thing, as early on collector, it used to drive me crazy, because I thought, why do I need all these variants? But now you're starting to get these variants that, you know, they're not just haphazardly chosen. Like, I went and sought out these artists because I thought they fit, and they're a niche for people, and people might really like this. And I agree, it is definitely something that people are collecting for the cover art. And kind of going back to something else you said, you know, offering the digital book, a lot of people will buy the digital book, so they never have to open the actual book. They can just keep it pristine, because that 9.8 or better is such a big thing for everyone, so they never have to break, you know, the binding, so to speak. And you know, they still have the art there to appreciate.
This is my background, in which that I'm sure that I've said it before, and if you got, I don't know how far again you got into my interviews, but everybody's who watches it knows exactly where I stand, where I am on the comic book investing side of all of this.
Yeah.
I'm building out an entire class. I run a podcast where I do 2 or 3 videos a week. And I talk about this, and I talk about it extensively, and I've made a lot of money on comic books. And so it is not a joke anymore.
No.
And this is going to sound messed up, but everybody's getting signed. Yeah. You know, I come from the wrestling world, and everybody on the indies and wrestling's getting signed.
Right.
And a bunch of people in comics are getting signed. And whether you're going to go into a Zenescope position, or a Dynamite, or a Dark Horse, or you're going to Marvel, DC, or Image, well, that's up in the air. Or you're building your own publishing house that then goes out and does $500,000 a year. You know, that's all starting to happen, and it's not an accident that indie is now doing very well. And then even the big guys, WWE, for those who don't know, and I know it's a bit off topic, if you look at who they hired in the last 8 months, there are about 10 wrestling companies they have legitimately gutted out of. And it's phenomenal who they've got it out of. And everybody who's been an indie wrestling fan for the last 4 years knows every single one of these people. And everybody who's an interviewer has interviewed a bunch of people who are now in WWE, including myself. Not to toot my horn, but it's the idea that these covers do that. And it is important because, God forbid, John Royal, Marvel might be knocking tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. And it's an opportunity for these artists too. And, being an artist myself, I just appreciate art. I love to see styles. And, if we get into talking about some of the stretch goals, that was one of the reasons why I offer the sketch cover cards that are there, because for me, I'm a fan of the raw art. I love seeing the pencils, and I thought, you know what? I want to share these with people because in its rawest version.
We're going to talk about some of that. Yeah. But let's get through the last.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Quickly.
Yeah.
So obviously this is cover G by Jeff Spokes.
Yeah.
And this is just cool where it's kind of, a little bit of a sketch-ish. And it's sort of, I guess, toned out, and we see Mite. And then there's also this cover with her working out. And this is sort of, cool. And it's got a little bit of a Steph Wilson feel to it. It's just by Joel Souza. Yeah. And then there's this as well, where this is cover I. And this is only available as an add-on. Correct. And we're seeing a little bit of Mite's ass. This is also a little risque.
Yeah.
But she's still fully clothed. You can see a little bit of it, if you look hard enough and close enough into the image. But obviously it's a knuckle sandwich. And so obviously these are 3. And I like the fact that you have a cover that's only an add-on. Yeah. Because I think that also makes that cover a little bit more interesting, where you can't back it individually. And I will say this also, I believe every comic comes with one of these as well.
Yes, it does.
If you back a physical purchase. And then I also think there's a digital copy, if I'm correct, included in every single order. So this way you don't have to open it up, which I like too, because no offense, I don't really like opening up my comics.
Yeah. No, and I realize that. And it also makes things organizationally a little bit easier for me behind the scenes. So, and there's actually one other cover that I just released today by Bill McKay. I'm sure you probably know Bill McKay's name. And,
I know who Bill McKay is. I just didn't put it into the.
No, it's okay. But I just want to make sure if anyone's watching this, it's there. And Bill is someone I met at Chicago Comic-Con a couple years ago, and I've been kind of hitting him up for 2 years now, and it was so fun because he was finally like, I didn't even see your DMs on Facebook. I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm in. I'll do it. And so he just rocked his cover too. And I know Bill has a really big fan base, and I'm super happy to have him part of it too. And
then obviously, is that an add-on or is that another just unlocked?
It's an add-on like the Minori Rogue one is. Same thing.
And then also there's some other stuff too. So there's the special mini prints that are out there. Obviously, Steph Wilson. There's Elias Chazoudis, and I love Elias. Elias did a commission for me. It wasn't even that expensive, all things considering, and it's one of them. It got 10,000 likes in a week on Instagram, which is awesome. And a funny story about it is that I'm walking to the Zenescope booth, and I'm just shopping around. I'm like, oh man, it's really cool. And I'm talking about Elias Chazoudis because I just got the thing done and submitted it to CGC. And then they're like, oh yeah, did you see this cover that just popped out? I'm like, yeah, I know, it's mine. And so that's my first introduction on a professional level to Zenescope. It's like, oh yeah, I'm like, that's mine. And 15 people in the crowd are like, man, you're a Zenescope fan. Did you see this? I'm like, yeah, I know, it's mine. And it's a really funny story with him. And then Pedro Perez, obviously you know him as well. Yeah. And so what was this like? Because all 3 of these guys are killing it. And I mean, Chazus alone is the biggest name on this card by far.
They're all fantastic. Elias, I contacted him early on to see if he would be willing to do this, and all 3 of these guys, I'm a huge fan of their art styles, and again, very different. And all 3 of those prints were covers with Comic Unity that were exclusive for just the Mite story. But I wanted people who didn't back Comic Unity to have an opportunity to see those. So I offer them as mini prints, and you know, Pedro is one of those people, like I almost would be willing to defer to him as the primary artist for Mite. Like, I think his style fits her very, very well. It's fun, it's cartoony, it's energetic. But he was a natural choice, and you know, Steph is just one of the nicest guys in the industry. And anytime I can get him involved with something, you know,
I'm working on getting him on eventually too.
You have to. He's such a great guy.
And so obviously I don't know Pedro as much as I know Steph Wilson's work, and I know Elias's work very well.
Yeah.
And Elias is so good, and he's another one that I have to interview, but he's tough to nail down.
Yeah.
He's also very shy. He's very shy. He's a workhorse. He's a workhorse.
Yeah, I mean, outside of, like, you know, DMing him, I haven't really talked to him beyond that, or emails. Same with Pedro, but you kind of get a feel for personalities too sometimes. And they were really good about, like, offering ideas and listening to anything that I might throw out there. That's another really cool part of this whole thing, you know, is talking with other artists and getting their ideas. And, you know, they'll come up with an idea. It's like, oh, I never thought to do that. That's so good, you know? And then I wish I had come up with that idea. And so...
but isn't that what it's about? Because I speak to other people and podcasters, and I'm not a comic writer, I'm not a comic artist, but obviously I'm in a creative sector, and I talk to a bunch of people. I'm in a fantasy wrestling booking group, and that's always fun. And obviously we throw things out and be like, oh man, I didn't even know you could even think like that. And it's always fun when you're doing stuff like that. And I do a lot of panels on different topics, and I speak to a bunch of people and be like, oh yeah, you just think about doing that. I'm like, that's a great idea. And I openly say, I didn't think of that. Yeah. I'm going to figure out how to incorporate that if you don't mind. And it's wonderful. And obviously, you know, when I usually give, like, with my commission with Charles, I said, hey, this is what I want. Yeah. You did a cover called Firefighter Sexy Samantha. This is Van Helsing. Have at it. Yeah. I just want her to look sexy, but I don't want her nude. And that's all I gave him. And I let him run with it, because guess what? I'm not going to tell an artist how to do their job.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Like, some artists work better with a very detailed, like, list of what to do. And some you're better off just saying, do your thing. And ultimately, I want an artist to be comfortable. I want them to want to do the work. So I don't ever want to be so restrictive that they aren't doing their thing, because obviously that's what makes them great. So go be Elias. You know, that's what I want for my cover. Be Steph Wilson. You know, you do Steph Wilson so well. That's why I want you. So, and I always think of, like, kind of, you know, piggybacking off what you were saying. I remember watching, it might have been like Last Comic Standing. But I remember Joe Rogan was like a judge, and somebody made a joke, and one of the critiques after his routine, Joe Rogan said, you know, that joke you told about whatever it was, he goes, that was one of those jokes that was so good that it makes you wish you had written it as a comic, you know, as a comedian. And that line always stuck with me. Like, every once in a while you see a cover and you're like, why didn't I think to do that cover or that pose? And so again, it just becomes inspiration down the road. And, you know, that's why you let artists do what they do. When they come up with something that you just, like, your jaw drops, you're like, yes, that's perfect.
And obviously, I mean, I love all of this, and obviously now we can talk about stretch goals. There's a bunch of stuff going on. I don't know. I don't even know how this all is working. I know you got some, like, a tarot card sketch cover. You got some extras by Joel Souza. I know Wendy was something. I know there's a bunch of, you know, I guess sketches, stuff that comes out. And I don't know the full extent of how this all works. I know the poker chip has to be unlocked, which was taken out of Tom's idea. I know that. I know where that was stolen from.
Yeah, I mean, the poker chips, though, are really they're really popular. And yeah, I mean, Tom would be the first one to tell you, yeah, you should do poker chips. They, you know, people love them. They love collecting them. Whether they use them or not, I don't know. But, you know, to me, if I'm going to do a stretch goal, I want to offer something that people will like and not something where they're going to be like, oh, great. And they toss it over their
I'll tell you
shoulder.
my 3 favorite stretch goals.
Yeah.
I like the poker chip because it's just cool. It's easily storable. I like magnets because I have a refrigerator, and I like metal cards because I like metal cards. Those 3 are my favorite thing. I am not, stickers are okay. I have no use for a sticker. I have no use for a bookmark.
Right.
If you want to throw an extra book in there, I'm cool with that. If you want to throw, you know, a signature on a book, that's fine. That doesn't mean anything. In fact, I actually don't want you to sign my book, to be honest.
Right.
And I hate when people do it. It actually annoys me more than not. But those 3 goals, because a poker chip is cool, and then if you have 15 of them from 15 different Kickstarters, now it's a collection and it's easily storable. That's the thing for me. Yeah. Playing cards are useful for me. Anything beyond that, like that's, and look, I'm cool with stickers and all that stuff. Yeah. But like, or even like a coaster, like a little cardboard coaster, that works for me because that's useful for me. And I'll have my friends over and like, oh, this is cool. What is this? Yeah. Like, and that's what's fun for me.
Yeah, I think conversation pieces are really cool too. And you know, the struggle with stretch goals sometimes is there's a lot of really cool ideas out there, but like, how do you ship them and still keep your costs down, especially if it's something bulky, because then that changes everything that you have to do. So sometimes you have to think that way. I know a lot of people are card collectors, which is one of the things I wanted. And I know, like, going back to the idea of, you know, people collecting comics for the sake of the covers. That was one of the reasons why the stretch goal I came up with was to show the original art. I mean, it's the art that I received, you know, that really kind of fleshed out the cover. And that's what I created the cards with, so that people could see like the sort of the initial renderings that I received to see the process.
I'm about to ask a really stupid question, so forgive me.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Are these open to purchase, or is this just added on? Because that's where I got confused massively.
The cards themselves?
Yeah.
It's, if the stretch goals hit, it's free. It becomes part of your package.
That was my question. Yeah. Because very confusing. I understand it's a ridiculously stupid question, but I've seen stretch goals that, oh, you could purchase this now versus saying other stuff. But obviously that's clarified, because I was confused, which means other people are confused too.
Yeah,
unless I'm the odd man out.
That's how the stretch goals work. If you hit that mark of, you know, whatever, 8,000, then everyone who's a physical backer gets that item. Yeah,
I'm well aware of how stretch goals work, but I've seen it the other way around too.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen it also with exclusive variants being unlocked to be perfect.
Right. And some people do that. I haven't done like unlocking exclusive variants. One of the stretch goals I had for this one was the Joel Souza story was unlocked, so that added an additional 6 to 7 pages to the book, which I thought was worthwhile. You know, that's a good chunk of story that's being added to it, and I, you know, really wanted it to be unlocked because it looks incredible. But yeah, and then like going back to what you were saying about, you know, easily stored, I think the cards do that themselves, and you know, having like say a poker chip from all these different you know, Kickstarters. That's one of the things that's cool about the tarot card, which was the first stretch goal we had by Becky Fuller. She has all these tarot cards from all these other, you know, Kickstarters of various characters. So that in of itself is a really cool collection to pay attention to, because, you know, there's one for Mite. There's going to be one for Scorpiana. There'll be one for Black Rabbit down the road. There was one for Ursula. I know she's done them for Tom, I believe. And so that's actually kind of a cool tarot card collection to have of just her art. So, and I wanted to make sure that I offered that too.
And then it's also, I just love the poker chips. I love metal cards. I love the idea of, there's some other stuff too. There's trading cards that are always cool. And especially when you get into a bunch of books and a bunch of other stuff where all those trading cards, then you have like 15 of them. From 15 different Kickstarters. And also it's the idea that this is issue 1. Yeah. And so obviously if there's poker chip 1 from you, and then people have collections, and if people have been packing Tom, and Tom's a good example, He's been doing poker chips for a while now.
Right.
So obviously, I've only backed 2 of Tom's things, and I'm going to get 2 poker chips. But then all of a sudden, 3 years down the road, when he has another 6 out, I now have like 6 or 7 poker chips.
Right.
And it's that type of thing too. Yeah. And that's super, super helpful. And obviously, I'm in it for the comic. I'm looking at it from that perspective. But it's always nice to receive something that maybe you couldn't get at a con.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it is like sort of a mini con experience where, you're only going to see them really on that Kickstarter. Maybe if there's a con and I bring some along, there might be some extras. But other than that, like, it's pretty exclusive for the most part. And there's not going to be a reprinting of them anytime. This is it. So.
Yeah, it's one and done. And it also rewards people for backing.
Correct.
So obviously, I think that's super important. Now, I want to do something really quickly. And I'm going to just show a bunch of covers. And one of them is those nude covers.
Okay.
I know you're involved in like 9 Kickstarters right now. and so obviously Scarlet and Ace is that, and that's the little demon.
Oh, yeah.
I know you get a Scarlet and Ace cover, and that's the new cover, and that's all I'm going to show that one before I get in trouble on YouTube. Then there's the little demoness. I think there's not a nude version of this book. No. I don't think there is.
No, that was a special kind of a crossover cover with Fire Bitch from Kara Nicole and Alfred Trujillo.
And then this has a nude cover, but I'm not going to show it.
Yeah.
Because this nude cover is more extreme, and this is Little Demoness as well. And so this is sort of cool in that regard. This is Low Life, which is, I think, the crossover of Little Demoness that's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it's actually the Lily the Demoness number 5, but Ace and Starlet are part of it, and this is a cover where it's supposed to show them kind of taking over the book, so to speak. So, yeah.
And so this is available because you're involved in like 9 different Kickstarters, and this is something else too, Little Demoness. And obviously, I'm doing this somewhat out of order because this is number 3 that you've done, and I don't know if there's a nude cover or if this is just a standalone.
No. This was a standalone.
And then this might have a nude cover, I think, but obviously this is suggestive, but I'm not too sure either because I'm really like bad at this.
Actually, I don't think that one did have a nude cover. I think we just kept it kind of sexy like that, if I remember correctly.
And it reminds me very much of Widow's Web in a lot of ways. That the tip jar cover. Oh man, I love Autumn Ivy and Raven Gregory, and I think DeBaffo did that cover. So really, really cool covers, and I like this stuff. And obviously, I just wanted to show this stuff because it's relevant right now with what's going on. And obviously, you're involved in like 10 other Kickstarters, and I don't even know half of them because I'm unprepared.
It's all good. Sometimes I forget, and it's like they'll launch, and it's like, oh yeah, Mike, I have a cover for that one, and then I'll try to promote it, and it's because you want to help out.
And so obviously I just mentioned a bunch of stuff. Obviously there's new covers, regular covers, and you've been all over the place. And I know that you have a relationship. I think it's Luis Torres, and he's from. I'm getting the name right, everybody. I'm being a responsible adult. I think it's Code Entertainment. Kodaks. And so obviously they do Little Demoness. They do, I believe, they do, I can't even remember the name here. What Necropolis, I want to say?
Necropolis. Yeah, Tales from the Necropolis, which is an anthology piece.
My questions today. Clearly, I can't read my questions.
It's all good.
And they also do pretty much Ace and Scarlet, and I know Sapphire Nova, who was on like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, did the cosplay cover for them. And so obviously it's pretty cool when you're a part of that company and really doing a lot of cover work for them because
and you'll be interested. Pay attention because Lewis has really gotten into the whole manga world. So he's going to be releasing a book, I want to say later this year, called VRXOXO, which is like all manga influenced. And I did one cover for that one in a manga style. So it might be one for you to check out. It's going to be fun.
Is it like an MMORPG?
You know what? I couldn't even tell you.
Because when people are using like VVORBOXY,
Yeah.
usually that's what that means in the
I,
gaming world.
I, I'm not as well versed in the anime manga world as you, so I couldn't even tell you.
My favorite genres are MMORPG, mangas, and anime. So typically anything that deals with that, I absolutely love because I love those worlds, and those are my favorite worlds to play in and be in and all that stuff. But I digress.
Yeah.
And obviously, I got about 10 minutes before I got to jump into my next interview. But
Oh yeah, no
I'm
problem.
curious, and I do want to touch upon it, given that you're in so many Kickstarters. Where do you foresee the future of Kickstarter going, and even indie comics? And I sort of tip my hat a little bit on what I think, because everybody's getting signed, but where do you feel it's going? Because it's been a very interesting 15, 18
You know what?
months in Kickstarter.
I am very grateful for the crowdfunding um, opportunity, because this is something like even 10 years ago, it would have meant trying like hell to get into Diamond, to get your stuff distributed, going
We've been
to
a
every
bitch
con
to get into
possible
that.
just to make a, 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 an inkling of what you could. But now this has become global. It's amazing when I look at the places I'm shipping to: India, Australia, Canada, all over the United States, Europe. It's so cool to be that, and then to work with people like Sanju. Like, I work with him, and he's from India. Yelenia Di Napoli is from Italy. The colorist for Mite is another Italian colorist, Andrea Celestini. Gat Melvin, who has done a lot of work with Tom and has done some cover colors for me, is from South Africa. And it's just amazing to be a part of that. And I think, you know, I don't see Kickstarter like stopping anytime soon. And maybe, to use a wrestling analogy, maybe in a way, Kickstarter and crowdfunding, being a vehicle for the indie world, is sort of the NXT to DC Marvel, or to the WWE of sorts. You know, it certainly is a contained place where I would assume Marvel, DC, you know, IDW, you name it, Dark Horse, can go and say, hey, that's an artist, that's pretty cool.
And
Because
also, I think some people are saying, you know, I don't want to be in the big leagues because I can make more money on the indies. You
correct.
know, there's a wrestler named Effie. Effie's
Yeah.
killing it right now. Effie
Yeah.
will make more money on the indie scene than in WWE, even if they offered him $1 million contract per
And
year.
I could see that. It does make sense. And, you know, you're playing by your rules if you're making your own book. You have control over your characters, which was the whole thing with Image back in the day. So yeah, it's really it's interesting, and I'm really happy to be part of it, because I think you see it. You know, indie comics. With everything, there's good and bad. There's pros and cons, but I think there's a lot of quality out there. You know, I think people who haven't explored indie comics still have a stigma about it's a black and white ash can and that's all it is. And, you know, I like to think that I'm putting out some pretty good looking books, and there's a lot of other people doing it too, and they're
There's a
worthwhile to
lot of
read
good stuff.
and look at.
A lot of good
Yeah.
stuff is coming. And I mean, this year alone, I can name like 15 projects that are amazing. And they're
Mm-hmm.
coming later this year down the road, and it is insane what is out there. And
Right.
those books, if you told me AEW would have a comic book, I wouldn't have believed you, done by a bunch of good people, and
Right.
especially good indie people. I think, what is it, Dirk Manning, I want to say, wrote it.
Oh, is he? Dirk's a
I
great
think,
guy.
and so it's a big deal for him because that book did like $150,000.
Wow.
It had a lot of push behind it. When you have Cody Rhodes, one of the vice presidents of that company, pushing it, and you have enough push and enough pull
Sure.
to do something special with it, and you have Jim Ross doing something special with it, and a bunch of other people, that's okay, and a lot
Yeah.
of manpower. But nonetheless, it could have blown up very much the other way too, and
Sure.
not moved. even with all that press. And it's very cool in that regard. So I'm excited for Kickstarter in a lot of ways. And it's just, you know, but there is some bad actors still on Kickstarter. It's just like everything else.
But kind of like when you're watching TV, you have the power to change the channel. So if you don't like something, you don't back it. And if you do, then you do. And hopefully that leads to more. And that's another great part of Kickstarter. The only thing I can say is I think it's going to evolve into something that is much more maybe user-friendly as it continues to progress. You know, for people who are backing and for the people creating the campaigns. And maybe there'll be more, you know, vehicles like Indiegogo to compete. But we'll see. But I don't see it going away. It's just opened up so many avenues for people and beyond comics.
I think that in a lot of ways, free market determines, because everybody who's been on Kickstarter for the last 4 years has backed a project that hasn't fulfilled.
Right.
And I have, and I would say 98% of what I back fulfills, which is a really good number. But I'm also very selective. And I think it's important that when people don't fulfill and then they say something else happened, well, you know, that gets out into the free marketplace because of Facebook groups and a variety of other things, and that sorts itself out. But that doesn't. And one of the things that Kickstarter needs to deals with still is making those people who don't fulfill more accountable.
Right, I agree.
That's the only harp about Kickstarter, is that they don't take accountability when somebody fucks up.
I agree, and that's one thing that I am always super paranoid about from my end, about making sure that my backers know, like, if there's something slowing things down, you're going to know about it, because I am never going to not fulfill, you know, what I said I'm going to. And that to me is cardinal sin number one. If you don't do that, like, you shouldn't even be allowed back on Kickstarter at that point. Also, there's communication issues. I've been waiting on a book that was supposed to come in April, and now it just got shipped out 2 weeks ago. And I'm not angry at the person, and the person knows, and I'm not going to mention who it is because the book's coming, but it's still annoying that you are 3 months late. Right.
Okay. It's significantly a problem. And that's another thing too, where I don't think you should be canceled per se or penalized, but you should let me know. But that's a personal grief.
Correct. And I think that's the least you can do, is if there's, you know, like, I know even with my last Into the Suck book, the printing process was slowed huge because there was a backlog of books, and it really it did piss me off, you know, because I want to get my book out to people. But it finally did come through. I kept everyone, you know, up to date. Like, here's what's going on. Here's what I know. And once it came in, you know, I'm in the process of shipping it out as quickly as possible. So, and as safely as possible.
That too. That's a big thing too. And I know about that, because when you're selling $300 comic books, they better be perfect. That's all I'm gonna say. But I digress right there. I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote yourself. Where can people find you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Kickstarter, other Kickstarters you're doing? You know, got a Patreon, all that fun stuff.
No Patreons yet. I'm in the process of becoming part of the Instagram world, which I will admit I am very, very bad about. I do have an Instagram, but that is something I'm going to try to make a much better effort of going forward. But the easiest way to find me is on Facebook. Almost anything that I post is going to be there. Into the Suck has its own Facebook page. Scorpiana Outpost 426 Studios has its own Facebook page. Those are the easiest ways to find me and what I'm doing. As far as Kickstarters go, Mite has 10 days remaining. Released the Bill McKay cover, and I'm hoping for a nice strong finish. I'm gonna give myself a shameless plug. It's a fun superhero book that I think people will really enjoy. And then, you know, Into the Suck will continue, but probably not until next year. Scorpiana 3 will be released this year. Black Rabbit later this year. Wendy Steen Shaner has her Naughty Fairies books, and I have a cover for that, and I'm just about part of any of her campaigns. Tom Hutchison just had Goth Day, which I did the interiors for that book and one of the covers. So hopefully everyone had a chance to grab that. And, you know, going forward, oh, and Luis Torres, his Lily the Demoness #5 is currently on Kickstarter. And I think I have 4 covers maybe for that one, but there's a lot of really cool covers there and some Sanju colors as well.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff coming out with you. And what I've been saying to everybody is that you have to support indie. And what that means is you have to back Kickstarters. You got to pick up people's works. You got to pick up, you know, their works if it's on other stores. You know, when things get to somebody's web store and maybe it wasn't out on, you know, Kickstarter. I know that Cannibal Run, Big Dog Inc., I think that's your Critter Interiors is up.
Yep.
There's only 100 of those, so you could pick up that, and that was not a Kickstarter book, but it's a super limited book. So you can pick that up at Big Dog Inc. And that's super important to support, you know, creators and economically. Now, I understand people are in a rough time. COVID has wrecked people. Money's tight. I completely get it. One of the things that is super important is that you have to share people's materials. You got to follow them on social media. You know, you got to share this podcast around. And one of the things that's actually happened is that I had an interview with somebody, and a bunch of people saw it, and somebody actually backed the Kickstarter for the interview. And so because I shared it around and people actually back. So it does make a difference when you share some of these Kickstarter links, even if you can't support it, because maybe you have 5 friends who just didn't see something and they're like, oh man, this looks awesome. I'm very excited for this. This looks cool. And then they back it. So it does make a big difference. And it's just as important as backing the Kickstarter. And so on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Well, first of all, Andrew, thank you so much. I'll do this show anytime you want. Just hit me up. I'll be there. So, and like you were just saying, I'm the first to admit I am terrible when it comes to self-promotion. I don't know if it's just one of those things where, you know, my ego just isn't the type of person to say, hey, look at my stuff. It's awesome. So I do rely on word of mouth and people sharing things out. That means the world to me. And hopefully the product itself is enough that people, you know they're promoting something that is worthwhile to get, worthwhile to read, worthwhile to collect. And yeah, that's all I'll say. So Outpost 426 Studios, you know, CB Zane, you know, hopefully get some people that'll follow and pick up, you know, Mighty Mite soon. And I really appreciate it. I really do.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better, and I'm not that great at self-promotion either. So there's a whole club, and all we can do is go up from here. And obviously, everybody go back the Kickstarter. And so on that note, this is a wrap.
All right. Thanks so much.